Welcome back everybody to the channel. Now in today's video, we want to continue on our Docker series. Now this application is something that should be familiar to us. In one of the project video that I did, we actually looked at a Node.js application to generate random numbers. All right, we looked at that already. Now what we want to do today in order to further practice our Docker skill is to learn how to containerize this number generator application. That is what we want to learn today. All right. Now we have looked at a few things on Docker. We've looked at Docker run. We've looked at Docker exec in the last video, and of course we looked at a few Docker commands. Now in today's video, we want to learn a few things. All right, on Docker network. And of course, we're going to be leveraging, some Docker image, like your MongoDB Docker image, the Mongo-express Docker image. And of course, we are going to be building this application, all right, package it into a Docker file and then build an image from that file and run this application as a container. Okay. Now, we're going to run it as a container that connects to the MongoDB such that everything that our user inputs here will be stored inside of the database. That is what we want to achieve in today's video. All right. So without wasting our time, let's get right into the Visual Studio Code and let's get started. Here is the folder that we're going to be dealing with. And by the way, this application is made available already in, my GitHub repository. So you can fork the repository, you can clone the repository, whichever one that works, for you. Now here you have the app-docker. That's the folder that contains the Docker version of this application. Now here you have the app.js, which basically is the logic behind the number generation. Okay, now we're not programmers. I'm not a programmer myself, but of course this application basically is, configured to generate random numbers, right? Using a combination of, letters and numbers. All right. And if you look at the combination here, you would see if you scroll up a bit, you're going to see the characters. So it's a combination of A to Z, and then of course, zeros, to 9. Okay. So this application basically, when you put in your name and then you put in, the string length, and then the number of combination is going to basically generate, random numbers for you that contains letters. It might be uppercase, it might be lowercase, and then it will also contain numbers depending on the length, that you specify, and of course the number of numbers that you want to generate. Okay, so this is the application. Now this application of course has a connection to the database. And as you can see from here, we have a database connection, and that is what we're using this particular, package, which is called the Mongoose, which is more like a MongoDB, database connection, kind of plugin. Let's put it that way. It's a plugin that you can use within your Node application to connect, to MongoDB. Okay, so we have that here, right? Now, if you look at the package.json, of course, the package.json is the dependency file, that we use to define dependencies that our application requires to function. Okay, so in the package.json file, we have the body parser, we have the express framework, and we have the Mongoose. All right, and if you look at the application also, these particular dependencies have been defined in the application, file. So you can see here it says it requires express, it requires Mongoose, and it requires body, parser. Now, of course, like I said, we are not developers. I'm not a developer. Programmers are able to explain to us better what all of these things means. But of course, these are dependencies that would allow us to be able to view this application the way we are seeing it on the screen. And of course, the MongoDB, the Mongoose, which is the DB client, is going to allow us to be able to connect the application to the database such that everything that I enter here, once I click on generate, it basically stores, into the database. Is that okay? So that is what this application, is about. Now, of course, we have the HTML, which is the front end, the front end that defines all the structure that we're seeing here on the screen. That one is right here. And of course, if you look at the Docker file, so we have a Docker file here that we want to use, to build this image, to build this application into a Docker image. And of course, we're going to run that image as a container later on. Is that okay? So that is what we want to achieve. Now, let me quickly walk you through, this Docker file. Okay. Now, excuse me. Now, if you look at what I have here, there's this folder called app-docker. So that's a folder that I have my application file and every other thing, all right, inside of that file. Now, as we have learned already in the previous videos, we already learned that the from keyword is basically to define the base image, which is the image or the operating system that my application is going to leverage in order to run. All right, that is what the from keyword is doing, all right, for us. Now, another thing here that you see is the work directory. Now, the work directory, if I hover my mouse over here, it basically tells us that the work directory, it says it is setting the working directory for subsequent commands, which means what I'm basically doing here is to say that this particular directory inside this image file system is where I want to run my applications. Which means I'm going to be copying my applications into the directory. I'm going to be running some command against the applications in that directory. And of course, everything that I have in my app-docker folder, I want to copy it into this particular directory. All right. So the work directory is basically telling Docker that this is the directory, all right, that you're going to use going forward. Which means any subsequent command, whatever action that I want to perform, will be, all right, applicable to the files inside of this particular directory. Which means every command that I run after the work dir, all right, that I specified will actually be against the folder that is set as the work directory. Is that okay? So for example, this copy package.json is basically going to copy this package.json into this work directory. The run npm install is basically going to run inside of this work directory, because the package.json, like we have learned, is the package, all right, manager, what helps you to manage your dependencies and all of that. Now, the run is a keyword to basically install. It's a keyword to basically execute commands, all right, inside of a Docker file. Right? So when you're building it, or when you're writing a Docker file and you want to build an image, the run keyword is the keyword you're going to use when you have to install something, when you have to execute a command, all right? The run keyword is the keyword you're going to use, all right, for that. So when you want to install anything as part of, all right, the image you're trying to build, then the run keyword is what you are going to use. So here, because I am using a node image, and of course by default, that node image comes with the npm pre-install. And npm is a package manager for node application. There are actually two package managers. You have the npm and you have the yarn. All right, you can use either of these package managers to build, all right, your Node.js dependencies. Okay, but in this case, we're using npm. So what the npm install is basically going to do is to look if there's any package.json file. If it finds any, it basically would help us to install, all right, all the dependencies that have been defined inside of that file, so that our application can leverage those dependencies, all right, to run as we expect. Is that okay? So the run keyword that you have here is the keyword in Docker file that you can use to what? Execute commands, install packages, and all of that. Now, after the run npm install is completed, which is basically to install all the dependencies, right? Then you have copy dot dot. So copy dot dot basically means I want to copy everything that I have in the app-docker directory into my work directory. Remember, I already specified a work directory. So everything that I am doing after this particular line, all right, is basically affecting this particular directory. Okay, so copy dot dot will mean that I want to copy views. I want to copy, all right, the views folder. I want to copy the app.js. I want to copy the Docker file. I want to copy everything that I have right here. All right, is what I want to copy inside, okay, of the /app directory. Okay, now my application works on port 3000, right? If you look at the application here and you scroll down, the app basically listens on port 3000. So in my Docker file, I'm also specifying that I'm exposing port 3000. So that basically will mean that by the time I build an image from this Docker file and I run that image as a container, my application is going to be exposing port 3000. So invariably, that is going to be my container ports. Is that okay? So the expose keyword, it is a keyword that you use in Dockerfile to basically expose, all right, the container ports that your application, all right, can receive connection on. Is that okay? So if I hover my mouse right here, it says define the network ports or ports that the container will listen on at runtime. Okay, so which means you can specify a single port. From what we can see here, you can specify multiple ports and you can specify a port range. Is that okay? But the expose keyword is basically to help you to define the port that your application, which is your container in this case, is going to listen on by the time this image is run as a container. Is that okay? Now, the last one we have here is the CMD command. So if you look at the CMD command, it says provides default for an executing container, which means when I am executing this container, what is that default command or thing that I want to execute? Which means the moment I do Docker run and I specify the image I want to run, the CMD section is going to be what? Triggered immediately. And it says here, it says if an executable is not specified, then entry point must be specified as well. It says there can only be one CMD instruction in a Docker file, right? You can only have one CMD instruction in a Docker file. So basically the CMD is here to help us to execute, all right, a particular command. And what is that thing I want to execute? The app.js is the, all right, script that we want to what? Execute. So the moment this container, this image that we're trying to build is run as a container, then we want the app.js script to be what? Executed immediately. Is that okay? I mean, if you look at a package.json file, it basically says script is what? Starts node app.js. And it says, what is the main application that you want to start? And it says the main field is a module ID that is the primary entry point to your program. So what is that script that you want to execute? And that is what the app.js. And if you look at the script that we have, it says start node app.js. All right. So basically what that means is that we are basically executing the app.js script. All right, because if you don't execute the app.js script, there's no way you are able to access your application in this manner. Is that okay? So that is exactly what the CMD here is doing. So CMD in bracket, you have the node. So node is the, all right, maybe the user or the program that we are using to execute this app.js. So basically, locally, what you will have done is to say npm, all right, start. And that would basically execute the app.js script. But in this case, we're doing what? We're doing node, then app.js. So node here is going to help us to execute the app.js, all right, script, so that we can access our application like this and use, all right, our application. Is that okay? Now, I believe the explanation that I provided is enough for us to understand what we want to do, all right, with this particular application, how we want to Dockerize it. And I believe with my explanation, you have been able to understand exactly what this Docker file hopes to help us to achieve. Is that okay? So what I'm going to do is I already pushed this particular application to my GitHub profile. So I'm going to go to AWS. I'm going to, start our Docker, all right, EC2 instance that we launched at the beginning, and I'm going to run this application, all right, on it. Like I told us, this application is going to connect to the MongoDB database. So that is, we're going to need to fetch the MongoDB image from Docker Hub. And we're going to be using the Mongo-express to basically, have access to, all right, the MongoDB, because the MongoDB does not have a GUI interface that you can actually, connect to manage your database. So instead, we're going to use a Mongo-express, which is like the GUI tool, all right, for your MongoDB database. So with the Mongo-express, we can actually visualize what is going on within our database, right? So that as the application is generating numbers and then is saving that, we can actually see the records, all right, using the Mongo-express application. Is that okay? So let's get to AWS now and let us start our Docker, all right, server. All right, so I'm going to come here, instance, and I'm going to start, all right, this particular server. This server, we created it when we started, this Docker series, all right, when I was showing us how to install, all right, Docker. I mean, particularly for those who do not have the Docker desktop or who cannot run the Docker desktop, all right, locally. So we start up the server together to basically use this, all right, in case you have issues with your Docker desktop or you can run the Docker desktop, for whatever reason, all right, so that we can use this, to give everybody a level playing field so that nobody's left out, all right, in what we're doing. Is that okay? Now, I'm going to come here. So the Docker server is running already, but the initialization is still not completed. So we're going to wait for that. And then let me just take you to the GitHub profile. So this is the GitHub page. The name of the repository is Node.js number generator app. That's the name of the application. And the folder we are considering today is actually this app-docker folder. And if you look at it right here, I mean, it contains everything that we actually need. The Docker file, the app.js, the package.json, and of course, our index.html is actually inside of the views folder. Is that okay? So we're going to take this application, we're going to clone it, on our EC2 instance, and then we'll begin to run, what we have to run. Now, while we're waiting for the, Docker instance to come up, I basically would want to take us to Docker Hub, okay, to show us a few things concerning the MongoDB, and the Mongo-express that we want to, use as our database, and of course, the database management tool. So here, I'm going to search for Mongo. And right here, I can see that there's a Mongo official, image. And of course, it has over 1 billion downloads, okay? Now, in one of the previous videos that I did, we actually looked at, MongoDB Atlas, which is more like a cloud, platform where you can actually create a MongoDB database and manage it, on the cloud. I mean, we use that for one of our projects, okay? But this time around, we're using Docker, to, basically connect application and, all of that. So I'm going to click on this Mongo image. And of course, I told us in the last video, I mean, this is an official, image. Now, if you look at these images, or this particular page, rather, now, if you want to pull this image, it is Docker pull Mongo, And if you scroll down, you're going to see, I mean, if you click on tags, you're going to see a number of tags, You can see Mongo Windows Server Core, I mean, there's MongoDB for Windows Server Core, and then there's the MongoDB Noble, I mean, a whole lot of version. But of course, we're just going to be using, the latest tag for what we want to do. Is that okay? Now, if you scroll down here, there are a few things that you can learn, from this documentation as regards how to start your MongoDB. Is that okay? So if you scroll down a bit, I mean, this is a simple way to run your MongoDB, image and start it up as a container, And we're going to be using, this particular example right here. And of course, we're going to be modifying, this example, okay? Now, the second one that I wanted to show us is the Mongo, Express, which is the GUI that you can use to manage, your Mongo, database. So Mongo, Express. So now you can see that is also, that also has an official image, And of course, it has over 100 million downloads, So click on that. And if you look at it also, it gives you, some information. So there are supported tags, but we're going to just go, with the latest version. But of course, you can see here that you have the Alpine version, and mostly what you have there is basically the Alpine, version. So basically, maybe this Mongo Express was built using the Alpine, so that tells you that the base image for this particular MongoDB, was maybe the Alpine, Linux, okay? And of course, here also you can see some examples on how to run the Mongo Express image, as a container. And of course, we're going to be going with this, option as well, okay? Now, let's go back to our EC2 instance, and by now, the status check should be 2 over 2. So let's click on that and let's connect to our instance. So I'm going to click on connect, and I'm going to copy this example that I have right here. So I'm going to come here, and I'm going to put, that command here. So press enter, and I'm going to say yes. And right now you can see that I am logged in, into my EC2, instance. So let me clear my screen. Now, the first thing I want us to do is to check if our Ubuntu user can actually execute Docker commands. Because in the last video, we bootstrapped the EC2 instance with Docker installation, and we did verify that our Ubuntu user can actually run Docker commands, So, but then, I mean, we've not started that server in a long while, so we're starting it today. So let's verify again if our Ubuntu user is able to run, Docker commands. So Docker PS, so we can see that it returned, something, and of course it didn't return any error. So that tells us clearly that truly our Ubuntu user can actually run Docker commands. Is that okay? Now, the first thing I want to do is to basically clone my repository on this particular instance, and from there we'll go on, all right, and then pull the Mongo image and of course the Mongo-express and start them, all right, as well. Next thing I'm going to do is to basically clone, all right, the application. So that's the next thing I want to do. All right, so I'm going to come here to my GitHub. I'm going to click on, all right, code. I'm going to click on HTTPS. I'm going to click here. And of course, I'm going to do git, all right, clone. And I'm going to put that here and I'm going to clone, all right, this particular application. So the application has been cloned and I will do cd, all right, and then logging into, all right, the application there. So ls, I can see all the things that I have. So the folder that we are dealing with, like I showed us, is the app-docker, all right, folder. So I'm going to go there and say cd app docker, all right, to log into that particular folder, and I can see that all the files, all right, are here. So what is the next thing that we need to do? Of course, we need to build an image, okay, from this particular file. All right, we need to build an image. And of course, let's do docker, all right, images. Okay, we can see that we don't have any images, all right, at all. And then if I do docker, all right, ps-a, I really don't have any container. I mean, the one running or not running, I don't have any container. So that's great. So let's build an image, all right, from this particular, all right, application. So we have the Docker file already that I've explained to us. So I'm going to say docker build -t. So I'm just going to call this number generator, and I'm going to put dots to basically say that my Docker file is in this current working directory. All right. So let's build that. All right, very quickly. So we're building that. So it's pulling the Node 22 Alpine, all right, from Docker up, and of course it's going to do the npm install to install all the dependencies that we have in the package.json file. And once that is done, it basically copies all the other, all right, code. Now the build has completed, so I can do Docker images and I can see, all right, my image. And of course, the image is actually 185 MB. And that is because, all right, we're using the Node Alpine. And like I told us in the last video, the Alpine, all right, images are very lightweight. Okay, it doesn't take too much space. All right, and it doesn't come with, I mean, unnecessary system programs and, commands and all of that. It just comes with the basic thing that you need to actually just, get going with your application, all right, or get your application going. Is that okay? So we have the image. So the image has been built. Of course, we need to run the image as a container. But before we run the image as a container, there are a couple of things that we need, all right, to do. Now, one of the things that we need to do is to create a network, a Docker network, right? Okay, we need to create what? A Docker, all right, network. Now, if you come here and do Docker network, all right, ls, now you're going to see 3 networks here by default. So there's the bridge, there's host, and there's what you call the null. Okay, so there are 3 drivers actually. So there's bridge, there's host, and there's null. Now, what is the difference between these 3 networks? All right. Now, the bridge is basically, let me just give a simple example. For example, in this application, all right, that we're trying to build, we need a Node.js application to be in the same network as the MongoDB, all right, and of course, the the Mongo-express should also be in the same network as the MongoDB, because these 3 containers, we want them to be able to talk to one another. And in order for that to happen, the kind of network that we are going to create is going to be what? The bridge network. So that my Node application or my Node container is able to communicate with MongoDB. My Mongo-express, which is the GUI for the MongoDB, is also able to connect to the MongoDB or a database. So in that case, I need to create what? A bridge network that allows these 3 containers to be able to talk to themselves. That is the bridge. Now, the host is when you want your container to basically interact with your local network, all right, with your local network, which means I want my container to use, all right, the IP address on my system, my physical machine. That is the host, all right, driver. Okay, that's the purpose of that. Okay, the null on the other hand is basically when you, just put it simply, when you don't want your containers to be in any network. I mean, you don't want any kind of communication between your containers, right? I mean, they may not have, all right, any kind of network and all of that, but of course, I don't think you have a lot of use case for that. But in most cases, you have what you call the breach, which is what most of us use actually, because we want our containers at the end of the day to be able to talk to one another. All right, now we're still going to get into Docker Compose and all of that, but of course, for now, let's stick to what we're discussing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a network, and I'm going to call it Docker Network. All right, Docker Network create. Okay, and I'm going to call that Mongo. Okay, so that's the name of the network that I want to create. And of course, for everything you create with Docker, it generates, all right, an ID for everything that you create. So now if I do Docker, okay, if I do Docker network, all right, ls, right, I can actually see my Mongo, all right, network, that's the name, and of course the driver is breach, so that everything that I create, every container that I want to create, that I want to use this network, all right, I want to use this network, all right, for all of the containers that we're going to be creating, so that I want all of the containers to be able to talk to themselves, and I want them to be in the same, all right, network. Is that okay? So Docker network create is the command. So Docker network create Mongo. I mean, it can be any name actually. So it can be Node, whatever name you want to give to it. Okay. So, but that's the command. So Docker network ls will list to you, all right, for you, the networks that you have created. Is that okay? Now we have created a network. The next thing we want to do is to go to the documentation. So let's start with Mongo. So like I told us, we're going to be using, all right, this very simple, all right, example. Okay, so I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to come here and I'm going to put it here. All right, so let's edit this line, all right, one by one, so that we can learn, all right, together. So you have Docker run. So the first thing I'm going to do is Docker run. I'm going to do -rm. So the rm basically, like I told us in the last video, is that when I stop this container, I want the container to be deleted also automatically, right? I don't want to have to delete the container myself. I want that when I stop the container, all right, the container should also be deleted, all right, immediately. So I'm going to remove this -it. We don't need that. And then I'm going to put my -d right here to basically say that I want to run it in a detached mode. Is that okay? So for the network, I'm going to specify the network that we just, all right, created. And the name of that network, all right, is Mongo. Okay, that's the name of the network. All right, so I'm going to remove this rm here. We already specified that. Now, the next thing I want to do here, let me just expand this. So the next thing I want to do here is I don't need these hosts that I have right here. Okay, so let's just remove all of these. Okay, so let's remove all of that. So the network is Mongo. Okay, now I want to give my container a name. Okay, so the name I'm going to give it to it is also going to be called Mongo. All right, so that's the name I want to give to my, all right, container. So I want to call it, all right, Mongo. Is that okay? So Docker run -rm. So rm there means once the container is stopped, the container should also be deleted automatically. -d there basically means that I want to run in a detached mode, and the network flag basically means I want to run this container, all right, on this particular network. Okay, then the -, name is Mongo, which is basically the name of my container. Like I've taught us already, when you're creating a container, you must give your container a name for easy management and for you to be able to access it, all right, very easily, because you can easily remember the name compared to the container, all right, ID. Is that okay? Okay, so now what is the next thing that you think we need to do here? So Docker run, all right, -rm, -d, network is Mongo, the name, all right, is Mongo. And of course, we need to specify the name of the image that we want, all right, to run. But then let's take a look at the documentation again, just to be sure that we're not missing out, all right, on anything. Is that okay? So I'm going to specify Mongo here. So Mongo basically means that is the image that I want to pull from Docker Hub, and that is the image that I want, all right, to run. Is that all right? So I'm going to press enter. So if you look at what you have here, the image is not available locally. So what Docker would do is to pull that image, all right, from Docker Hub, all right, download it on our system, and then run that image as a container with the parameters that we have specified. And that is exactly what is going on right now. Okay, so the Mongo image has been downloaded, and of course we have a container ID. So now if I do Docker PS, I can see that I have a container, all right, that is already running, that is derived from the Mongo, all right, image. And Mongo, all right, DB actually works on port 27017. So that is the port. But of course, if you look at what we ran here, we didn't actually specify any port mapping. And that is because we want Mongo to be available just within, all right, our network. We are not exposing the Mongo container, all right, to the public. We do not want to be able to access it, all right, from the browser directly. We only want to make the Mongo container, all right, available within, all right, our network. And that is why we are creating a network and we're running the container inside of a network that we have created. Is that okay? So that's the first thing that we have to do. The next thing we need to do is to set up or to run the Mongo-express container to basically, all right, be able to virtualize the Mongo database that we have just created. So I'm going to go back here and go to Mongo-express. Like I said, we're going to be using, all right, this particular example. So I'm going to copy that again, and I'm going to put it here. And of course, let's, walk through this together. All right, and edit a few things that we do not, all right, need. So again, we have Docker run. All right, with Docker run -rm. So basically, like I said, once the container is stopped, then delete the container as well. -d to run in a detached mode. And for the network, like I told us already, we're going to actually put these on the same network. So the network name is Mongo. Okay. Now you have this -he, which is basically to specify an environment variable. Now you are trying to create a Mongo-express container, and that Mongo-express container is going to have to connect to a MongoDB database that is already running within your Docker, all right, engine. Okay, so what we are doing with -e is basically to specify an environment variable that basically tells the Mongo-express container that this is the Mongo database we want you to connect, all right, to. Is that okay? So that is the purpose of the environment variable. And you may be wondering, where did I get that from? I mean, if you scroll down, you can see a list of environment variables here that you can actually specify depending on your use case. Okay, so the one that we are specifying basically is what the me-config MongoDB server, right? To basically specify the Mongo, all right, server that we are trying to connect to. Okay, now here, the me MongoDB server we are connecting to, the name actually has to be the name of the Mongo, all right, container. And in our own case, the name of the Mongo container is what? Is Mongo. All right. So -e, specify the environment variable. All right. So we need to edit this. Okay. So I'm going to come here, all right, and specify the name of the, all right, of the MongoDB container, right? And the name of the MongoDB container is what? Is Mongo. And that is one of the reasons why I mentioned to us earlier that it is important for you to name your containers, right? For easy access, for other applications that may want to connect to that, container, for them to be able to easily, all right, connect, all right, to it. Now, if you look at what we have here, we're specifying the ports, all right, flag, which basically means we want to be able to access the Mongo-express on the web browser. Okay, so that is what we're specifying the flag. But of course, the MongoDB itself is hidden, right? It's not available on the browser. It is only accessible within, all right, the Docker network. And that is why we are creating the Mongo-express in the same network as the Mongo, all right, database as well, so that the Mongo-express is able to connect to the database. Okay, but of course the Mongo-express has to be exposed, since the Mongo-express is the application that we're using to interact with our Mongo, all right, database. Okay, so the port is 8081. Of course, we're going to give this a name as well. So name, so we're going to call it Mongo, all right, Express. I mean, just use the same name, it doesn't hurt. Okay, and right here, I don't think there's anything more that we want to do, so we can basically just press enter, and that would also try to fetch it locally, but of course it can't find it locally, so it's going to pull it from Docker Hub and then run a container, all right, from the image. Now, if I do Docker PS again, I can see here that I have two containers running. And of course, if you look at what you have here, the Mongo-express is opened, all right, to everybody, which means I can access this particular application on the browser. And of course, if you have my public IP address right now, you can also access this particular, all right, Mongo-express right now. Of course, you won't be able to access it because, I mean, after the recording, I'm going to basically just delete, all right, the containers and shut down the instance. So you won't be able to access my Mongo-express. But of course, I'm just letting you know that what this means is that this particular application is accessible on the browser. Is that okay? So now we have started the MongoDB, we've started the Mongo-express, okay, but then let's try to connect, all right, to the Mongo-express on the browser. Let's even see if the Mongo-express is able to connect to the MongoDB before we run our application as a container. So let's go to the browser and let's verify that. Now, before we go to the browser, another thing that you can also do to verify if your containers have started, if it's working, is to check the logs, all right, of your container. So here, I'm going to do Docker logs. All right, Docker log. So what am I trying to check? I'm trying to check the Mongo-express log. All right, Mongo-express. Okay, so here it tells me, it says waiting for, all right, Mongo on port 2701. And obviously it was able to connect, all right, to the MongoDB database, right? So, I mean, if it wasn't able to connect to the MongoDB database, I'm sure we're going to have an error right here. But with this, we can see that the Mongo-express was able to connect to the MongoDB database. Now it says the Mongo-express server is listening at, NEIP column 8081, okay? And that tells you again that since we're using AWS, we have to open up 8081 in our security group, okay? So that's a clue there. Now, here it says the basic authentication credentials are admin and pass, which means by the time you access your Mongo-express through the browser, you have to log in using admin as the username and pass as the password, okay? But of course, it's not recommended. Like you can see here, you can also change that in your config.js, okay? So now with these, we know that our Mongo-express is actually running, and of course, it has been able to connect, all right, to the Mongo database. Is that okay? So we're going to come here to our instance page. So go to your instance page right here. And this is refreshing. So click on your instance. Okay, so let's see. Click on the instance. I'm not able to see some things here. So let's see. Okay, so I'm going to expand this up. So click on security. And right now we only have port 22 opened up. Okay, so now a few things. We need to open up port 8081. And our application is also running on port 3000. So we need to open up 8081 and port 3000. So those two ports, we need to open them up. So I'm going to open up my security group in a new tab. And I'm going to come here, click on edit inbound rule, add rule. And of course, I'm going to add 8081. And that should be accessible from anywhere. And I'm going to add port 3000 as well. And that should also be able to, that should be accessed, all right, from anywhere as well. Okay, so I can go back to my instance, click on details and grab the public IP address of my instance now. And I can come in and I can put it here and say column 8081. All right, and I press enter. Now you can see that it's asking me for the username and the password, and we saw that in the log already. So that's going to be admin and that's going to be pass, right? So log in, and right now we can see that truly, all right, our Mongo-express was able to connect to the MongoDB database. Now look at this. Here, the host name is what? This is the container ID, right? So let's verify if this corresponds to the MongoDB, all right, container ID, right? So DB521, so that we are sure that, it's not just us cooking up something. So if you look at what you have here, the MongoDB container ID, if I zoom in a bit, all right, it's D521D308DA9B, and that is exactly what you have right here. So it shows us clearly that Mongo-express is able to connect to the Mongo, all right, database. Is that okay? And it told us that the MongoDB version is 8.03, and of course the Node version and all of that you need, all right, to know. But what we see here basically tells us that this Mongo-express is connected to, all right, the MongoDB database, and that's a very good, all right, one. Now let's go back again. So I'm going to reduce the view here. So let's go back again. So do Docker images. So our num-gen is the next one that we want to run, all right, as a container. So we're going to come here and say Docker, all right. So Docker run -D, right, -rm, and -p. So the application runs on port 3000, right? So 3000, all right, that's the port that the application runs on. So I'm going to give it a name as well. And I'm going to call these, just num, let's just call it num-gen, right? So what other thing do we need to do? So don't forget your network. They have to be on the same network. Very important. So the flag network, all right, network. So the network name is Mongo, All right. And what else do we need to do? What else? Docker run -d, run in the dash mode -rm. As soon as the container is stopped, it should be deleted. -p to specify the port, all right, and then the name is numgen, and then the network, all right, is Mongo because it has to be on the same network as the Mongo database, right? So the last thing is to specify the image that we want to run. Okay, so that's going to be num, all right, numgen latest. Okay, I mean, let's just put that. Okay, and then so that is, I mean, the image is available locally, so it's going to be faster than the previous one. So let's do Docker PS, and we can see right here that we have, all right, our container is running. Okay, so we have the port open to everybody on port 3000. So let's go here, let's grab the instance IP again, copy that, all right, paste that, and that's going to be :3000. And let's press enter, and right here we are able to access our application. So the application is up and running. We're able to access the application, all right, and of course we can also check the application log as well. So we can do, all right, we can do something like Docker, all right, logs, and the name of the container is numgen, right? And so we can see here that it says server is running on port 3000 and connected to MongoDB. So it also shows us, because in the application, we already have a logic in that application that basically will tell us if our application is able to connect to the database. I mean, if you look at the logic from here, all right, it says, okay, if the connection, all right, is established, then it says print to the console connected to Mongo, all right, DB. And of course, if it's not able to connect, it's going to basically give us this error, MongoDB connection error. So within the application, we already provided a log to the console to say that, I mean, if you're able to connect to the MongoDB database, then, all right, give us connected to MongoDB. And that is exactly what we have here. So it tells us basically that our application has been connected to the MongoDB, and so we don't have anything to worry about. Is that okay? So let's generate some numbers and let's see if that is going to go right into the database. So I'm going to put my name here, and the string, the number that I want to generate like 5 different, all right, numbers. So a number of combinations. So the string length, okay, that's going to be like 5. Okay, so 5 different, strings. So a mixture of uppercase, lowercase, and numbers. So the number of combinations that I want, do I want 3 combinations? Do I want 5 combinations? So I can just say 5, okay? And then I can come and say generate, all right? And right here it says combinations generated and saved, all right, successfully. So let's go back to Mongo. All right, let's refresh this page, and we can see right here that we have a database created, because that is also part of the application logic, that the moment you're able to connect your database and then you generate something, the database should be created automatically. So if you click here, you can see that we have a collection. So the collection name is combos. So if I click on that, I can see truly that, of course, something has been inserted, all right, into the database. So then if I click on that, I can see the username, I can see the length, I can see the count, all right, and I can see the combinations, all right, that was generated. An interesting part is if I click on clear results and I put the same user and I say the string length that I want now is 4 and I want 6 combinations, and I generate again. Now it says to me combination updated successfully. So if I go back here and I just refresh this particular page, I can see that the combination has indeed, all right, been updated. So now I have the length as 4, I have the count as 6, and then I can see that the combination has been updated to just 4. All right, so here I have this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Is that okay? And if I go to my collections, all right, I can see that the record was basically updated for that user. But of course, if I go back here and I, all right, clear the result and I specify another user, all right, say, let's just say, Zach, for example, right? And I say I want 5 and I want 10 combinations for Zach. And I say generate, all right, it says generated successfully. If I go back to the combinations and I refresh my page, all right, I can see here that, of course, a record has been created for Zach, all right, automatically. And if I click on that, I can basically see, all right, the information that I have right here. So that is pretty, all right, interesting. So in today's video, we have learned, all right, a whole lot. We've learned Docker network, how to create one. We have learned the difference between the Docker, the bridge driver, the host driver, and the node driver. And we have seen how you can actually create, all right, containers that belong to the same, all right, network. Is that okay? So with this that we have done now, I believe you have gained an additional understanding of Docker, all right, and some important things, all right, about Docker as well. The last thing I just want to show you here is if you want to verify if truly these containers were actually connected to the same network, I mean, you can use the command docker network inspect. So you can come here and say Docker, all right, network inspect. So what's the network you want to inspect? The name of the network you want to inspect is what? Is Mongo. So that will give you, all right, details about the network and the containers that are connected to this network. Is that okay? So press enter, and right here you can see, all right, the name of the network. And if you scroll down a bit, you can also see that the driver used is bridge driver. And if you scroll down, you can see the subnet, you can see the gateway. And if you scroll down right here, you can see that this num.gen container, and this is the container ID, all right, is actually connected to this network. And the IP address given to it is this. The Mongo database itself is connected to this network. And all right, the container ID is right here. Okay, and then of course this is the IP address given to it, and of course the Mongo-express is also connected. All right, and this is the all right container ID, and this is the IP address all right given to that. Okay, so that's basically how to inspect a network and all right, just basically find out if truly your containers are connected to that network. So lastly, we're done with everything that we want to do. And of course, one of the things that we specified is that once we stop the container, all right, the container should be terminated automatically. So I'm going to use a Docker command to basically delete, all right, or stop all of the containers at once. And that command is Docker, all right, so Docker stop, okay, and then $ bracket, and then I will say Docker ps-aq, and then close the bracket. So Docker ps is to list all containers. -a is to list containers, both the ones that are running and the ones that have been stopped. Then the q there is basically to execute it in a quiet mode. All right, and that means what I'm saying is that whatever it is that Docker ps-q generates, the Docker stop command should basically stop all of those containers. That's what this command would do for us. So I'm going to press enter, and that's going to basically stop all of the containers that we have created. And like we specify in the Docker run command for all those containers, the moment you stop it, all the containers will also be deleted immediately. So if I come here and say Docker, all right, ps-a, I can see here that I can't find any, all right, container, because the Docker run command basically has the -rm flag, which means the moment the Docker, all right, container is stopped, then the container should also be deleted immediately. Now, the last thing I want to show you here is how to prune your entire system so that, if there's anything you don't need, any images that you don't want again, any network you're not using again, you can just use the Docker system prune to delete everything. And of course, that will help to reclaim some space and make sure that your Docker engine, all right, is light as much as possible. So Docker system prune, all right, -a, okay, is the command. So -a means, delete anything that is not being used. F means don't ask me any question, just go ahead and prune the whole system. Okay, so that's what the F flag means then. So press enter, and you can see here is deleting the network. And of course, it's deleting all the images. And of course, it was able to help us reclaim about 1.06 gig. And so if I do Docker, all right, images, all right, I can't find the images again. And if I do Docker, all right, network ls, all right, my Mongo network, all right, is nowhere to be found as well. So thank you so much, guys. I hope you have enjoyed the session. Apologies if this was a long video, but I needed to just, explain all these things to us and, do it practically so that we can understand and, of course, learn something valuable, because your time is valuable to me. And, of course, it's not something that I take for granted. So thank you so much. All right, again, tomorrow, we're going to look at another concept in Docker, all right, as we try to understand, all right, Docker from zero, all right, to hero. Thank you so much, and I'll see you on the next one.